What's up, math scholars and math haters? This is Mr. W. Today we're going to tackle question 22 in the 7th grade math questions that North Carolina released this past school year. The question tells us that 4 friends, Alice, Mary, Sarah, and Ellen, each flipped a coin different numbers of times. Alice got heads 75% of the time, Mary got heads 8 out of 10 times, Sarah got heads 17 out of 20 times, and Ellen got heads 3/5 of the time. And we're trying to figure out who had the greatest percentage of heads. So, the big skill that this question tests is the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percents, and how we can use any of those 3 to represent some number. Now, we're not actually going to get to decimals here, but you're using the strategy that I'm going to use. But we will talk about fractions and percents, because there's actually 2 ways that we can solve this. Now, I'm going to break out a number table. I'm going to make 2 columns. One column I'm calling heads, the other column I am calling out of. And we're going to go ahead and try to convert each of these 3, Mary, Sarah, and Ellen, 8 out of 10, 17 out of 20, 3 out of 5, into percentages. So to start with, I'm going to make my top row of this the same. And we're trying to figure out how many times they would have gotten heads out of 100. Because we're trying to find the percentage of heads that everybody got. Percents are always out of 100. And now, let's say I start with Mary. Mary got 8 heads out of 10. So how many is that out of 100? Well, now I'm just going to look for a number pattern where I can multiply right to left or down to up. And in this case, the easiest pattern for me to use is a down to up pattern where I multiply by 10. So if 10 times 10 is 100, 8 times 10 would give me what? Now the answer to that you can get by your calculator or by times tables, but you should get 80%. So Mary got heads 80% of the time if she got heads 8 out of 10 times. And through the magic of editing, everything except this top row, everything in green and blue is going to disappear. Ta-da! It's all gone. So next we're going to talk about Sarah. And Sarah got heads 17 out of 20 times. And so I'm going to look once again for a right to left or a down to up pattern. And this time, the easiest one is going to be multiplying by 5 down to up. So if 20 times 5 is 100, 17 times 5 is what? Well, 17 times 5 you can figure out in your calculator or in your head, however you want to do it, but you should get 85. So Sarah got heads 85% of the time if she was getting it 17 out of 20 times. That's 85 out of 100. And once again, all the blue and green stuff is going to disappear through the magic of editing. And ta-da, or whatever. Finally, we're going to talk about Ellen. Now, this one's a fraction, but we can think of a fraction as 3 out of 5. We can translate this fraction bar to out of. So now I have smaller numbers. So my pattern's going to be a bit trickier to find, but we can actually go back to what we did before and say that if we had 20, we multiply by 5 to get 100. If we see 5, we can multiply by 20. So 5 times 20 gives us 100. 3 times 20 is going to give us 60. So we have Alice got 75%, Mary got 80%, Sarah got 85%, and Ellen got 60%. The greatest percentage of heads is going to be Sarah with 85%. Now, there is another way to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and erase all of this with the magic of editing. And ta-da! I have left my number table with my heads column and my out of column. I've left it there. And I've also left the answer there, but the other way that we're going to be able to do this is we're going to ignore the fact that this says percent, and we're actually going to find each person's fraction. Now, the key with fractions, or the reason why we can do this, is that fractions and percents all represent the same numbers. So if we turn all these into fractions, we should actually end up getting the exact same, not just person who got the greatest percentage, but the person who got the next to greatest after that, and finally the lowest percentage. So we'll go ahead and work that out. First thing we're going to do for this strategy is see that everything's out of 20. So I want to make sure that every fraction I put down is out of 20. And I'm going to say that Sarah was 17 out of 20. So next thing I'll do is I'll come here to Mary and say that Mary ended up getting 8 out of 10. If I want to change this denominator to 20, I need to multiply it by 2. So I multiply my numerator and denominator by 2. 10 times 2 is 20. 8 times 2 is 16. So Mary got 16 out of 20. I can come down to Ellen and see that Ellen got heads 3/5 of the time. To change that denominator into 20, I'm going to multiply by 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 4 is 20. Ellen would have gotten it 12 out of 20 times. And finally, for Alice, Alice is a bit trickier. I'm going to have to actually say that if she got heads 75% of the time, 75 out of 100, I'll break out my number table again and ask, okay, so that's what out of 20? Now, once again, I'm just looking for a right to left or an up to down pattern that I can use. Easiest one to do that with is going to be up to down dividing by 5. 100 divided by 5 is 20. 75 divided by 5 is what? Well, you can use your calculator or your mental math skills. Either way, you should get an answer of 15. So Alice got 15 out of 20 heads, Mary got 16 out of 20, Sarah got 17 out of 20, and Ellen got 12 out of 20. The biggest fraction, since they all have the same denominator, we're just looking for the biggest numerator, and that's 17, so that's still Sarah. The point of doing it that way as well was just to say that either way we do it, we'll end up getting the same answer because fractions and percents tell us about the same numbers, and they're just equivalent ways of writing the same number, just represented in a different way. But they will get us the same answer as evidenced by this question where we got Sarah from both methods.